Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this incredibly special event and, kind of early look at the BB Files, uh, which has had its virtual world premiere here with Unacceptable. And we're so grateful to the organization for getting the word out about the film and to all of you for being here and for watching it. My name is Tara Hein Phillips. I am the CEO of Jolt. And I'll be in the background supporting the conversation, but I'm going to turn it over in a moment to the Unacceptable team. I just wanted to give a couple of Zoom housekeeping tips. If you have questions, please use the chat, as I see some people are already doing. Thank you. And we'll keep an eye on those and try to get those to the team afterwards. And the meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want your face to be in the recording, please stay off camera, and then hopefully that will keep you protected. Also, I just want to say that we are very supportive of the free and open exchange of thoughts and ideas on Jolt. It's the type of films that we go out of our way to support. We do want this space to feel safe and respectful for everybody who is participating, and we will be in touch with anybody who is who's not perhaps in that spirit, and we'll remove anybody who's being truly disruptive. I would also just add, if there's any Zoom disruption during the event, we would send a new link to everybody who's registered, so just check your email if that happens. And without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Yuval to introduce the team. And once again, thank you so much for being here.
I think it's moving to me or to Yuval.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ophir. Go ahead, please.
So hi, everyone. I hope that everyone can hear us fine. My name is Ophir Gutelsson. I'm a founder of Unacceptable, together here with a bigger team. I want to make sure that people can hear us well. So before we continue, we are hosting it internationally, and we have a big group that's joining us also from Israel. And I want to thank Sharon, who is here for simultaneously translating. So if you are from Israel and you want to hear it in Hebrew, make sure you press on the bottom the globus, and then choose the Hebrew channel. And if you have any issues with that, please message the host or the panelist. So again, my name is Ophir Gutelsson. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to partner here with Jolt and with the creators of the BB Files film. I'm wearing today my original T-shirt from 4 years ago when we were coming out, joining people from Israel to kind of like show the risk regarding the idea that there will be an indicted prime minister and the risk to democracy and the risk to Israel. We didn't 4 years later know that it will be so devastating and the chaos will be in a big way. Unacceptable is a grassroots movement started here in the Bay Area, but expanded worldwide, all the way to Australia, obviously North America, and with also teams and other groups partnering with other groups in Europe. We are all pro-Israeli. We are fighting for democracy in Israel. We are fighting to make sure that Israel stay Jewish, democratic, liberal, peace-seeking, and the way that it was in the name and in the way that it was founded. We are going to have a big crowd today, and I want to have everyone to be respectful for everyone else. This is a difficult time. We have still 101 hostages that are not being returned, so we call for a deal now. There is a war going on that you probably have seen on the movie as well. That and it's going on with very bad trajectory, and we want it to end because that would be the only way to bring the hostages back home. I want to, we have 803 soldiers fallen just today We've learned that our good friend, grandson, a good friend Asaf Agmon, his grandson fell in the battle, and we will share the eulogy because it's a very powerful eulogy. Asaf is one of the first that inspired me and others to join the fight for saving Israeli democracy. So on behalf of all of us, Asaf, if you hear us, and I assume you don't, we are sharing your loss and the loss of everyone who is losing their lives in this all the innocent people that lose their life in this war. So we will keep following the news. We know that there was a break news today about the ICC. We are still following and understanding what's happening there. But our big message to everyone here is to make sure that we know that everyone knows that we are not our government. We are fighting for the Israeli people. We are fighting for the Jewish people that are being affected from this, what's happening. So please bear with us, join us wherever you can on unacceptable.org. We'll put the links. And again, thank you to the Joel team, thank you to the film team, and we will continue. And I want to thank Yuval Leon, I'll transfer it to him. Yuval is the one that made this connection happening. Yuval is helping to make the event happening, connecting Unacceptable, and the Bibi File team. Yuval is also the founder of the Bibi Files and the various pro-democracy effort in Israel, and he's also a filmmaker himself and currently producing the documentary film on the protest movement called Awakening: The Fight for Israeli Democracy. Yuval will introduce our speakers, and thank you again, and be in touch. Yuval.
Thank you, Ophir, and also for the important work you do with Unacceptable. It is my honor to introduce Guy Rolnick and Alexis Bloom. Guy Rolnick is our moderator today. He is a professor of strategic management at the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, and the founder of the Israeli newspaper, The Marker, Israel's leading economics newspaper, and a documentary film creator. Rolnick is the 2013 recipient of the Sokolov Lifetime Achievement Award for Excellence in Journalism, Israel's version of the Pulitzer Prize. He has been covering Netanyahu's corruption for years and brought to the front of the public discourse in Israel the nefarious government, tycoons, media triangle. Alexis Bloom is the director of the Bibi Files and the award-winning filmmaker and producer of Divide and Conquer, the story of Roger Ailes. Bloom is known for her compelling storytelling on powerful figures and controversial subjects. She has been nominated for 3 Emmy Awards. Thank you, Guy, and please take us away.
All right. Thank you very much, Yuval. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this timely and significant webinar. It's my distinct privilege to moderate today's conversation with the acclaimed filmmaker Alexis Bloom, whose work has consistently demonstrated the power of documentary storytelling. This documentary arrives at an inflection point in Israel's history, where the very foundations of its democratic institutions are being tested. While the world watches the developments in the region and decision of the ICC in Hague, the Bibi Files offers something unprecedented, the first comprehensive examination of the internal dynamics that have led to what many observers describe as a democratic crisis within Israel. For too long, international discourse about Israel has been confined to the prism of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While this remains the crucial issue, Alexis' documentary breaks new ground by revealing different kind of struggle, one taking place within Israeli society itself. The film exposes how democratic institutions built over decades face unprecedented challenges, not from external threats, but from within the coalition and the Israeli corridors of power. What makes the Bibi Files particularly compelling is its clear-eyed analysis of the motivations behind it. Through meticulous research and powerful storytelling, the documentary reveals that Benjamin Netanyahu's actions are not driven by ideological conviction or political philosophy, but rather by the personal imperative, his determination to avoid prosecution and trial for corruption charges that could result in imprisonment. This insight helps explain many of the controversial decisions and political maneuvers that have characterized recent Israeli politics and the ongoing war. The film illuminates the Israeli paradox today, how the coalition, through strategic political maneuvering, has managed to accumulate disproportionate power over Israel's democratic institutions. This coalition's primary purpose appears to be to protect Netanyahu's personal interest at the expense of every liberal values and democratic principles. Now, while this film focuses on Israel, I think that this documentary resonates far beyond its borders. This is a time when democracies worldwide face similar challenges. The Bibi Files serve as both a warning and a wake-up call. It demonstrates how quickly democratic institutions can be undermined when personal political survival becomes the primary motivation for governance. So today's discussion with Alexis Blum promises to provide insights into both the filmmaking process and the critical issues facing Israeli democracy today, and how do we move forward to stop its democratic backsliding and societal and economic collapse. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a filmmaker whose work consistently challenges our understanding and pushes us to engage with crucial issues of our time. Alexis Blum. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Guy. Thanks very much. That's a very kind and generous introduction. I'd have to say that this film was made by a team. All films are collaborations, and honestly, none more so than this one. We had a fantastic Israeli crew who helped me all along the way, you know, both practically and like late into the night discussing all the issues. And I had a very good, small, tiny, tight team in New York as well, who helped make this film. So even though I'm the one who's speaking today, you know, behind me, there's a whole team.
Cool. So, Alexis, I'd like to start with the backdrop of this film. How did an international filmmaker like yourself find your way to making a film about a corruption trial in a small Middle East country? Can you share the backstory of how this project came to be?
Sure. The materials, the interrogation materials were leaked to Alex Gibney initially. He got a message on Signal asking whether he was interested in seeing the interrogation materials. I don't know who from, I don't know when exactly and how that happened. But he gets a lot of messages sort of in this vein because he's a well-known investigative journalist. And some end up to be something and many end up to be nothing. Gets sort of a, you know, he's been doing this for years. So he gets a lot of random emails. But to his credit, Alex sort of always pulls on the thread. So he pulled on the thread. And the first I knew of it was when I got a call from him saying, listen, we have some of these materials, you know, would you be interested in making a film and checking them out and making a film? And I immediately said yes. I mean, yeah, Israel's a small country, but it's a very important strategic country. And beyond that, it's just a fascinating country. And I've always been connected to it. You know, I've worked in Israel before. I've been in Israel for family reasons. And it's fascinating. It was fascinating. You know, Netanyahu has an outsized reputation. So it was what in America we say it's a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer for me. And then when I started looking at the materials, it was fascinating. It was both sort of amazing and interesting and also pretty daunting because the quality of the materials is hit and miss. We did the best that we can. And in the film, they've been worked on and, you know, we've taken as much of the noise out as we could, but it was out of sync. And, you know, the police are not famous for their beautiful camera work, you know, so I was trying to figure out who was in it and who isn't in it. And I have to say, key in my understanding of all of these materials was Raviv Drucker, who helped us every step of the way. So he's obviously an expert in corruption, not only of Netanyahu's corruption, but also of prime ministers and ministers prior to Netanyahu. And we were very, very fortunate that he agreed to come on as a producer and to help me kind of navigate these worlds. So if I had if I wanted a question answer like, who's Momo Filber? Who is this guy? I could ask Raviv and he would say, oh my God, he's this and that. And, I could get the information from online, but to have somebody explain it to you in human terms, and to kind of break it down and give you what you're not seeing online, like the personal history of all these people was supremely useful. So, we slowly started plotting our way through this material, trying to kind of wrap our arms around it. As I said, it was exciting, but it's also daunting. It was a lot of material in a language that I don't speak. And it required like a team of us to try and figure out, what we had.
All right. So we'll, in a minute or two, we'll see the first clip from the investigations. I know a lot of people are waiting for that. But before we go to this clip, you mentioned that in the past you visited Israel, Israel. So
yeah.
About this journey, how has your understanding of Israel's story evolved?
It's evolved. I mean, I've always known Israel as a somewhat tribal place. I don't think I'm the first to say it. It's a conglomeration of people with very different views. But I've come to understand that it's more fractured than just that now. And I've come to understand that Netanyahu has played a very important and profound role in that splintering of the country. You mentioned that I did this film, Divide and Conquer. And I sometimes thought of applying that title to this film too. I'm reminded of Netanyahu whispering in that rabbi's ears, the liberal Jews have forgotten what it means to be Jewish. That sort of incendiary politicking, if you're not with me, you're against me kind of thing. I didn't know to be present in Israel before. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, when you dive into a subject like this, you can't help but be informed, and you can't really understand modern Israel without really understanding Bibi. And I don't think I'd sort of seen him as a figure, but a somewhat remote figure. But, I didn't understand how he'd come to power. It was, on the back of Rabin's assassination. So I've come to see Israel as I sort of almost see it like a Carnival House mirrors, as a sort of reflection and refraction of Netanyahu himself. And I've come to appreciate the power of the voices who oppose him. There's a very solid and sort of profoundly moving body of voices who oppose him, some of whom I interviewed for this film, and some of whom I met along the way. And their integrity, I think, has been much more apparent to me, over the course of the making of this film. I participated in some of the protests, and spoke to people who've been maintaining the protests over a, ridiculously long period of time. So, yeah.
All right. So let's first see a short clip, the first one, and then more questions, please.
תגיד לי את השקרים האלה שהוא מספר עכשיו. אתה מוכן לזה? אני מוכן, אני מאוד צס לזה. לא יודע אם מוכן, אני שלי רוצה, אני רוצה. שניהם, מה אתה חושב שאני מפחד מהם? ארבעה השקרנים האלה. שקרנים, משקרים במצח נחושה. במצח נחושה, אומרים דברים שלא היו. שאני הנחיתי אותם, פתאום אני שומע תיאום. אמרו כאן, לא תיאום, לא יודע מה זה. לא יודע מה זה. שניהם אומרים את אותו דבר. הוא משקר על ערן לעבוד. אלה אומרים על הדברים האלה. מה זה? לא תתפקד.
היום הודעתי לבאי כוחו של ראש הממשלה, מר בנימין נתניהו, על החלטתי להעמידו לדין בכתב אישום הכולל 3 אישומים.
Okay, so by now, Alexis, you already speak fluent Hebrew. Tell us what we've just seen. What is it?
Well, we've seen Bibi confronted by evidence that the police have presented to him. They have recordings of various other people and they play them for Mr. Netanyahu. And he is confronted with sort of testimony that he cannot deflect from and he cannot undo. I would say that 90% of the time his strategy is to deflect or to say, I don't know, I don't remember. But at this point of the interrogation, he's played recordings that the police have obtained from other people, I would say, including Momo Filber. And you don't see that in this film. Momo Filber, who was in the Ministry of Communications, but prior to that was a sort of very loyal lieutenant, I would say, to the Netanyahus, had been brought into interrogation and had said directly to the police, my biggest mistake was to wear 2 hats. I was trying to work in the Ministry of Communications, and I was also trying to serve Mr. Netanyahu and take care of this Elovitch story. I'll give you, I mean, you can watch the film and you'll see the other parts, but this is the part that we were not able to show. And that precipitated actually the combination of Nir Hefetz, the Elovitches, and Momo Filber. And at this point, the police are gathering all of these people, and it's to do with the Elovitch, with the Bezek Yes deal. And Netanyahu loses his temper. You know, I always wonder, does he really lose his temper, or is he doing it for sort of effect? Alex Gibney and I go back and forth on this. Alex Gibney thinks that there's a performative element to it, but I think that actually he does lose his temper. He's interrogated multiple times and over hours and hours, and it's very hard to maintain a sort of, we say an affectless, a behavioralist sort of exterior. And I think that he, after he's played all the testimony from the various other people, loses his cool. And he's saying, in this case, with the Bezek Yes deal, and it's a lot of money, it's like, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, that everybody else is lying.
Yeah, and we also add for people who are not in the details that Momo Filber was a state witness cooperating with the prosecution and the police. And during the trial, he decided that all of a sudden he flipped. Basically, he doesn't remember anything. And he was harassed during the trial. And then when he showed up to the trial, he came up with a total new story. So I want to go back to...
That's not unusual, by the way. That's happened a few times. You see it with Arnon Milchan. When you look at the first police interrogations, and, you know, with Arnon, they're pretty gentle. They're not very aggressive. You know, Arnon is older. I mean, also with Momo Filber, they're not very aggressive. And he spills the beans. And then, you know, because of the time between the initial interrogations and the indictment and then coming to court, you know, it's years, and multiple lawyers have been able to sort of get stuck in, and the Netanyahus have been able to work on them. You know, their story gets very watered down. But I think it's hugely instructive to go back to those first conversations with the police when they don't know that they can water down their story and they tell the truth.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Milchan and his lawyers. Milchan had to change lawyers upon request of Netanyahu, and for the global audience of this Zoom, it would be interested to know that one of the most powerful and richest person in the world, Larry Ellison from Oracle, had to intervene on the behalf of Netanyahu and get Milchan basically to let go of his lawyer. So, Alexis, when you spent weeks and months in the editing room, who was the audience that you had in mind? Who are the people that you most wanted to reach? And what is it that you think they don't yet understand about Israel, the Middle East, democracy, that you hope that this film will reveal?
This film was always positioned as an international film for the international audience. We knew right away that there would be a legal problem with showing the interrogations in Israel. So it wasn't prejudice on our part saying we're not going to do this for an Israeli audience. It was just a necessary, legal, practical fact that we would not be able to legally broadcast this film in Israel. We also found it, I always thought it would be useful for the international audience to understand more about Israel. I know a lot of diaspora Jews. I'd have the conversation with my dad, a diaspora Jew, all the time, about, criticizing Israel versus criticizing Netanyahu, and me trying to point out that there's a difference. So the audience was actually always an international audience, and trying to get them to understand that Netanyahu is separate to Israel and Netanyahu is separate to Judaism, that this is one man, one family, that is quite distinct from the rest of the country. So that was my thinking. The same as, Trump is different to America, or Biden is, or, Macron is different to France. And I think that because of Israel's unique position in the world, there's a tendency amongst diaspora Jews or actually non-Jews to conflate. And that's what I was thinking. I was thinking we need to create a portrait of this family and help people understand that the trial is actually important in Netanyahu's own mind, in his own calculations. Somebody said to me, he doesn't care about the trial. It's like a nothing to him. And I was like, no, it's not a nothing to him. And they were like, he'll never go to prison. And I said, no, Olmert did. And this is all news to an international audience.
Yeah. So let's quickly watch the second clip, and then we'll go back to this question that you raised about Netanyahu and Israel, please.
It was a week after the government was formed. Netanyahu presented a very drastic, very aggressive reform against the legal system. And he just put all Israel in a turmoil.
The people said enough is enough. The legal reform that he wanted made it so Netanyahu would appoint the judges that will hear his appeal. I mean, it was transparent. He wanted to avoid any prison time.
He wanted to change the way we elect judges. We need to change the power that they have, so they will have much less power, the Supreme Court. We need to change the police. We need to change the Attorney General. We need to choose a different Attorney General.
Okay, so I want to go back to what you said. This is self-explanatory, what we just heard from Nimrod Novik and Raviv Drucker. So can we say that this is a film about Netanyahu? Can we really distinguish Netanyahu from Israel? Or is it also a film about Israel society as it stands in 2024? I agree that many Israelis today describe themselves as hostages of a far-right radical coalition that has executed like a hostile takeover of the country. Do you think your audience will, how are they going to interpret this part of the film?
I hesitate to sort of psychoanalyze the audience. You know, it's sort of like, it's tricky. It's not my job. Everyone takes away what they take away from it. We just wanted to show a clear sequence of events. You know, he's investigated, there's an indictment. People on the center and the left abandon him in the coalition. He makes these alliances. And then, hey, presto, the Supreme Court overhaul happens. You know, it is a portrait of Israel. It's a portrait of what Israel is going through. But it's, you know, it's always connected to Netanyahu. In films like this, you know, it could have been like 6 hours. I know I have 2 hours, and that's, by the way, very generous. Most people don't sit through a film for 2 hours. And that the thread is always coming back to Netanyahu. That's my job with this film. You know, my job is not to make a film about the Israeli landscape and Israeli society. Do you learn something about it along the way? You sure do. I think most people didn't realize the magnitude of the protest movement. You know, we read about it here. It's in the papers along with a bunch of other stuff. But I remember when I started making this film, it was before October 7th. And I remember taking the subway with a colleague and them saying, what are you going to work on? And I was like, I'm going to work on this film about democratic backsliding in Israel, you know, around the Supreme Court protests, around the protests. And they looked at me and they were like, good luck with that. You know, like, you know, who's going to watch that kind of thing? So they were very ill-informed, you know, as well.
Okay, so it's been now a week or two after some people got the chance to see it. So what kind of reactions are you getting so far? I'm not talking about film critics, of course, but I'm talking about people from outside Israel who care deeply sometimes about the country. And what is the reactions that you get now? Do they see, is there here a potential to change how people see Israel and its political challenges?
I think so. I think so. I mean, it's a early day, right? You guys got one of the first links. So it's not released yet. December 11th is the date where it'll be released in the US. So it's very early days. But we've been having a number of small screenings and the response has been pretty good. You can't please everyone, but you know, there's some people who are like, well, you know, somebody said to me, you should interview the people on the right wing and why they're doing this. And I was like, oh, I don't think that you can have everybody's view on it. You know, and it's a spicy subject. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of different views, but in general, most people are very moved, very informed. They say almost unanimously, wow, that was very informative. I had no idea. And I think that it's been very useful as a sort of character study of Netanyahu and just a way to understand the history from 2019 to now. The reaction has been very good. I mean, good. I don't know what's good, that they understand the film. People say it lands, it's powerful, and it's very informative.
All right. So before we go to some questions from the audience, we have a lot of questions from the audience. We'll be able to address only a couple of them. So let's see the last clip, please.
Well, I would say that tragically, the Americans don't know how to call him out. There was no plan for ending the war of Gaza, bringing the hostages home, and changing dynamics in the region. And things only got worse. Netanyahu is the architect of chaos. And as we speak, when all eyes are on the front in Gaza and the front in Lebanon, he is implementing his plan in the West Bank with the extreme right. He may create a situation where it's irreversible.
Okay, so a couple of questions, very very up to date with everything that is happening this morning. So, in light of today's ICC decision issuing arrest warrants, in Israel, the prosecution and the legal system are prosecuting Netanyahu for 4 years, but there are no arrest warrants yet against Netanyahu and Gallant. How does this can potentially affect the message of this film?
I think it's momentum. I think that it's all sort of pieces that fit together. If you are standing on a rock saying Netanyahu's a good guy, Netanyahu's the leader we should have, your position is getting lonelier and lonelier right now. I mean, I'm not going to comment directly on the charges, whether I think they're right or wrong, or whether this is the forum to charge him. I certainly think that he, as I make the point in the film, is willfully continuing the war, to enable his own political survival. And, continuing the war is a very sanitary phrase. When you're continuing the war, people are dying. Israelis are dying, Palestinians are dying, a lot of people are dying. So I don't know. I think it's clear that he doesn't speak. Ami Ayalon said this, and when he said this, it's not in the film, but he said, Netanyahu does not speak the language of diplomacy anymore. So, that's I agree with him. That's where we are. And I think that if you are looking at Israel's long-term survival, you have to acknowledge that the language of diplomacy is something one must use at some point. It's a tool in your toolbox. You can't continue leading your country by military means at all times forever. So I don't know whether I answered your question, Guy. I don't think I did. I think that the announcement today is all a gentle push in the right direction. I hope it is.
Yeah. So we have a lot of questions about Trump and about Netanyahu.
Yes.
I will just ask you that. Do you see any parallels between what's happening in the political system in Israel and in the US generally, and of course, this past election 2 weeks ago?
I do. I see very strong parallels. I'm haunted by the parallels. I didn't want, when we made this film, I was careful not to make it a film that put Trump and Netanyahu in the same channel, because they are different people. But when I look at the protests over the Supreme Court now that Trump is president, I have a completely different feeling than when I first started this project. I feel like, you know what, that's possible for us. That is possible. I wonder whether I'm going to be packing my kids up in a car and driving to protest in DC, in a year, in 2 years. I think that President Trump has shown a historic disregard and disrespect for the rule of law. He's a convicted felon. I mean, Netanyahu is not convicted, but Trump is, and he's quite explicit in his disregard for the law. And, he's hell-bent on revenge. Those are his words, not my words. Every time I say that, I think, oh my God, that sounds so extreme, but those are his words. And I think in the same way, Netanyahu has churned through person after person. And when you look at the lackeys that populate his government right now, loyalty, seems to be the quality that he prizes. When you run a hamburger franchise and you find yourself in government as
I think we have an issue with Alexis.
Alexis?
Yes.
Yeah, you were disconnected in the last 30 seconds. So
sorry.
can you repeat just the last 20 or 30 seconds?
Am I back? Oops.
Yes,
am I back? Sorry. Yeah, I find the parallels haunting, and I'm concerned about the appointment of Mike Huckabee as the ambassador. I don't think it's going to be good for Israel.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. I know we assume that most people, if not all people, know it, but we do have a couple of questions. So I want you just to share. People asking why this film is not broadcast in Israel and what's the legal situation. So can you talk briefly about it so people understand the context of what's happening here?
Absolutely. In its simplest sense, it's a privacy law. So you cannot broadcast legally interrogations, police interrogations of people without their permission. You need to get their permission to broadcast it. In America, we have the First Amendment, and you can broadcast them. In Israel, it is against the law. So in Israel, you've had some great reporting by Raviv Drucker, who you see in the film, by Gidi Weiss in Haaretz, about these cases, and you'll see the transcripts of the interrogations. So it's legal to report it on paper and to talk about it, but you cannot show the videos in Israel because it's against the law. It breaks Israeli privacy laws. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. We have a question from one of the members of the audience that is concerned for your safety. Did you get any kind of threats during this journey?
No, and nobody knew that we had this material. You know, when we got this material, as I said before, we're a very small team. We were not rolling in money or rolling in people. We were a tiny, tight team who quietly went about making the film up until now. So nobody knew we had the material. So I was fine along the journey. People knew I was making a film about Netanyahu. But you know, he's written about a lot, and there've been other films about him. As for, I don't feel particularly endangered now. I think there are a lot of people out there criticizing him, and that we should all carry on doing that.
One question that we have is whether you had any doubt whether you should, the trial is still going on, and
Right.
had any doubt that maybe we should wait and see how the trial ends.
Yes, I did think about that. Well, the one thing we didn't want to do was for Netanyahu to be able to say that he wouldn't get a fair trial because this material was out. But all of this material has already been out in Israel. Hadass Klein has testified. It was written about widely. Nir Hefetz has testified. It was written about widely. All your great investigative journalists have written articles about this case and have quoted things that people have said from the interrogations. So it's already in the public domain. So I didn't feel like Bibi would have a legal argument to say, hey, this is all out there now because it's been out for years. The international audience didn't know about it, but they're not the ones trying Netanyahu at home. Those people, it's been out.
Yeah. So we touched briefly on that, but perhaps your perspective as someone who spent a lot of time researching Netanyahu in the past 2 years, other than the fear of prison, which is a clear and present danger because we have a track record of sending prime ministers involved in corruption to prison. What do you think motivates Bibi when he takes, those very radical positions and actions in the last 2 years?
You know, I can only repeat what people have told me. I've never met the man and spent with him, but I've spent a lot of time with people who know him very well and who did not go on camera. So, you know, I've spent hours talking to, for instance, a former chief of staff who wouldn't go on camera, but was happy to talk to me about all the private meetings and you know, and what he thinks. I'm repeating what other people tell me, which I think is more valuable than telling you what I think. People say, people who are close to him, who've worked with him, who he has appointed to their positions of power, former heads of the Shin Bet, you know, former chiefs of staff, that Bibi is motivated by the sense of his legacy and his own self-importance, that he wants to be seen as Winston Churchill, that he wants to be seen as a great leader. So separate to the fear of prison, I think that from what I've heard, paramount in his calculation always is that he is this great, storied, smart leader who, I mean, touched by the Messiah is a phrase that came up multiple times in my investigations. I didn't think this was going to be the case. You know, actually, you can ask people like Uzi Bella. When I started this film, I was like, clearly he's flawed, but he's in a complicated situation. Perhaps he's like trying his best. And people were like, no, 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 no. He thinks he is bigger than everyone, greater than everyone, that everyone else is a dwarf, is a pygmy, and he is the great leader that Israel deserves, and that nobody else can steer Israel to safety but him. He has no belief in anyone else, and that this is reinforced by the fact that he's, you know, surrounded himself with such a low sort of quality of person, that loyalty is the quality. So he's got some pretty ill-educated kind of former, I keep on thinking, you know, of the phrase like a tournament of hunchbacks. And I know I shouldn't say that, but that's his government right now. Those are the people he surrounds himself with, because frankly, loyalty is the number one quality that he expects. Sorry, hold on. My husband's just come in. Can I? Oh, no, okay. I'm so sorry. It's real life in here.
Yeah, so
Sorry, babes. I'm only going out to 1,000 people. It's okay. He's looking for his lunch. So yeah, so it's like, it's touch. And if you speak to his biographers, you know, Anshel Pfeffer or Ben Caspi, it's not an outrageous thing to say. It comes back time and time and time again, that Bibi, you know, is motivated by a sense of his own greatness.
yeah, I can actually attest to that. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I spoke at length with a person that worked very closely with Netanyahu for years. He was not a lefty at the time, and yet he told me exactly what you just said, that Netanyahu, in a way, believed that he's like King David. Yeah, King David, and he is outraged by the fact that a lot of people, including some of those billionaires that he asked for all kind of favors from them, are not appreciative enough of him and his role in shaping the history and protecting Israel. Two last questions, because we're nearing the.
I have to say, Guy, can I just say, I wish that all of these people that we speak to off the record would go on the record, because I feel like if they did, and you know who you are, please, it would make a real difference, because they're all in the security apparatus. They're all former government, you know, close people. And if they all decided, you know what, we're going to say something, I think it would make a difference. Yes, one of them said to me, leaned forward and said, I don't know whether you've seen this show. It's called House of Cards. That's what it was like. And I was like terrified. And I said, why don't you speak out about that? And they were like, well, you know, I have kids in the army. I'm not sure. And I was like, isn't this the time that you ought to speak out? aren't the stakes so high? But something in their calculation is causing them to keep quiet.
So you mentioned the House of Cards. So I'll share an anecdote from, I think it was 13 years ago. House of Cards started showing. I think it was Netflix. And I was not able to see it in the first couple of months. And guess who recommended me to watch House of Cards?
I don't know.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
Oh my
Well, yeah, in his office, yes, he told me, Guy, you must see it. And by the way, Netanyahu, I think I already wrote it at some point. Netanyahu told me that he thinks that House of Cards is fantastic, and he depicts it very close to reality. And he added something interesting that the difference between what we have in Israel and what we see in the US, that here in Israel the billionaires have much more power than the politicians, while in the US, it seems that Frank Underwood controls everyone. In a way, this was his wish that he can turn around the way that the political economy of Israel and have more power over the people with money. We need to end, so I want to ask you something probably a lot of people are curious about. So you had generous time for this. You have 2 hours, which is a lot for a documentary film, which is fantastic. But let's say you have another 15 minutes. Is there anything particular that was like left in the editing room and said, wow, if I just had another 15 minutes, I would like to share this part of the investigation or something, because I think it will add a lot of value to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, Momo Filber, he was amazing and great and damning. More Sarah, but I felt like it's too easy to blame her. So she is both terrifying but very entertaining, and she loses her temper in a multitude of ways. More of the Bezek yes stuff that the American audience just can't understand, like the way that all worked with the monopolies and everything like that. So more of that. What else? What else hit the cutting room floor? Oh, I had a great scene. I mean, it's not key to our understanding of Netanyahu, but I filmed in a cigar shop in Tel Aviv with these fantastic guys who were like, the person on the street kind of thing. And we smoked a bunch of cigars. They smoked a bunch of cigars and talked about how Netanyahu had affected their lives. And one of them said, this cigar costs $150. I can't allow myself to smoke it, but he does. And he goes, I guess billionaires paid for it. And then he turns around and he goes, actually, no, I think we paid for it. And it was like this, you think it's a funny scene until it's absolutely crushing in the end. And I feel that sort of reflects somehow the Israeli experience, that people still have a good sense of humor. Some people are way too traumatized. But like it was sort of an everyday Israeli scene. So, I mean, there's tons and loads more of the interrogation. There's more Milchin. There's all the other players, that people aren't familiar with here in the US, that they just couldn't take on any more characters.
So, Alexis, I think it all calls for Bibi Files, the sequel. Bibi Files 2 and 3 and 4, maybe.
Let's hope we don't need it.
Okay. So what's your next film project?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Still finishing this one. Let's get this one out there.
All right, fantastic. I want to thank everyone in view of time. I want to thank everyone who helped put together this fantastic webinar, and I want to thank Alexis and her team for putting together and creating such an important film at this particular moment. And on a personal note, I really hope that this film will get a lot of people who care about Israel outside of Israel to be more involved in Israel. I think that we have reached a point that we need all the help that we can get, because we're reaching, as I said before, an inflection point. And, the role of civil society today in the path forward of Israel today is more critical than ever. So Alexis Blim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very, very much for having me. Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you, of course, to everybody for this incredible webinar. Thank you for being here. It was such a great conversation. And thank you again to Unacceptable for bringing their audience to us to have this conversation today. I'll turn it over to you, Shim.
Thank you so much, Tara. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Shimrit Brown-Kamin. I'm a proud member of the Unacceptable team. And I want to thank you, Alexis and Guy, for this enlightening conversation. Thank you for being with us today and for sharing your important remarks. It was very, very powerful. And I want to thank you, Alexis, for working on such an important film. As Israelis, though we know all the details, seeing Netanyahu in his closest friends inside the interrogation room is hard-hitting and emphasizes even more the reason why Unacceptable was established, to say an indicted prime minister is unacceptable. And I also want to thank Jolt for organizing the screening and for working so hard to make today happen. And thank you to all the organizations who partner with us to get the word out there. And I want to say special thanks to all of you who joined us today. For our Israeli friends, we are full of admiration for you for nearly 2 years being out there in the streets, fighting for Israel's future with your persistence and determination. We are so proud to be your allies and partners in this struggle, and we will keep fighting shoulder to shoulder for the future of Israel. And for the audience in the US and worldwide, if you haven't yet, we invite you to join Unacceptable, stay connected and participate in our activities to push back against Netanyahu's government and support a democratic, just, and peaceful Israel. I wanted to put the link to join us on the chat. You can see it so you can get connected. And just to close, I know things look dark right now, but here we are, all of us. We are not alone. We are a wonderful community and partnership of Israelis and Jewish Americans, and we have the power to make a change together. So please share the movie, make sure your friends will watch it and understand the importance of this struggle. And together we will join forces and keep fighting to ensure a better future for Israel and the Jewish people worldwide. Toda rabah and Laila Tov. Thank you so much.
And thank you to Sharon for the translation.
Yes,
thank you, Sharon. That's
and
very
please
true.
also go to Jolt Film and watch this film, tell your friends, and also watch our other films because I think you'll love them as well. Thanks.